Hanna Saunders she's a second-year Master of Information student at University of Toronto and will be graduating this spring. Woo, again. Before coming to Toronto, Hanna completed her BA with honors in political science with a minor in women's studies at Mount Allison University. Hanna currently works at the UTM Library as a graduate student reference assistant and volunteers in the UHN library system. She is particularly interested in instructional and training librarianship and hopes to pursue a career in either special or academic libraries. So let's welcome Hanna.
Okay. So my talk today is based on essentially my experience being a graduate student reference assistant at the UTM Library, which is just a wonderful place, and I love being there. But being there, I've learned a lot of things. So this is just my perspective on one issue that keeps coming up time and time again there. So we have a pretty busy reference desk at the UTM Library, which is wonderful. I've been there since last May, and while I get all kinds of different questions every day, I never know what I'm going to hear, I've noticed a theme. Students are really stressed about their citations. That's where I work. But like seriously stressed. I have talked students down from tears over citations, which I just think is absolutely unnecessary and wholly unproductive in a lot of ways. When students learn about citations, it usually comes at these sort of impromptu times, like first thing in the semester when they can't really apply these lessons in any actual way because they don't have their assignments yet, and they don't know what to expect from them. And then when they hear about it again, it's right before an assignment is due, and the information comes in the form of this dire warning. Do it right, or you're out. You will get kicked out. And that's sort of what they then take to the assignment, this idea that if their citation is wrong, that they've plagiarized, and that they are going to get kicked out of school. So what it ends up doing is making them very confused and really quite stressed. And it feeds into a bigger problem, which is that they don't really understand what the purpose of a citation is or what plagiarism is. Because we all know that plagiarism isn't using a comma instead of a semicolon in your in-text citation. That's a minor formatting mistake, and it's not going to get you kicked out of school. However, I've had students think that that's exactly what's going to happen to them. So talking about citation and citation formatting from this sort of terrifying place is not productive because it makes students panic and it leads to fear and confusion, which then leads to avoidance. And students then just don't really like to deal with their citations until they absolutely have to, which is when I get to see them on the reference desk, sometimes 20 minutes before their assignment is due. But so the more questions I got from students, the more I started to think that there has got to be a better way to talk to students about citations. And I recognize that librarians are often not the ones that get to talk to students about citations first, and so we don't get to get in there before they get this warning. I know that, but I do think that when we do get to talk to students about citations, that maybe we could talk about it in a different way. Maybe we can switch up the conversation that we're having about citations with students. Maybe we can start from a happy place. When I get students stressed about citations, I really empathize with them because I used to hate citations. I hated them. They were like the worst part of everything because they were just so confusing and I didn't really understand what I was supposed to do. There was all these different formats and I didn't really get the point of why I had to do this. Why did I have to do all of these little nitpicky things? But I've grown to absolutely love citations. In all of the crazy turmoil and insanity of writing research papers, citations are sort of this calm place of reliability and consistency, and they're lovely. But they're also eternally useful. Other people's citations have led me to some of the best information I've found that I know for a fact I would have never found had it not been for that useful little footnote or that great citation in an article that led me to that piece of information that I thought, that person is talking about exactly what I want to read about. And that's sort of what part of the purpose of a citation is it not? So now At this point in my life, between all of the coursework of almost 6 years of post-secondary education, combined with the many formatting questions I get on the reference desk, it would be easy to say that the reason why I'm so comfortable with citations is that practice makes perfect, and I'm just familiar with it now. And yeah, that's probably part of it. But I think that it's bigger than that. I think it comes from a place from where I started to understand and look at citations differently a long time ago. So right now in many classes, the tactic for teaching students about citations is scaring them into doing it right. But I'm not convinced that this is actually working very well. So what I'm proposing is that when we talk to students about citations, we focus on two key things. What are the real purposes of citations? So really, the first thing is giving credit where credit is due. We really want to ensure that the person whose idea or information that we're using gets credit in that way. Think about it this way. When you're using a person's idea in your paper, you think that that idea is so awesome that you, in turn, want to use it to back up the argument that you're making, but also share it with your professor. So think of a citation as a way of writing a high five to that person, like, awesome, great idea, that was exactly what I needed to back up my point. And then the other purpose of a citation is making that information findable. Remember how awesome that idea was? It was so awesome that you wrote it down and then you used it in your paper. Somebody else might also think that that idea is equally as awesome, and they're going to want to find it, which is why you have cited it and put it in your bibliography, and so that they can then find it. Now, when you look at citations from these two perspectives, all of the weird things about them kind of start to make a little bit of sense. So most of the time when I make this purpose of citations clear to students, the stress level immediately decreases. It's like, oh, that's what that's for. And it actually surprises me that they hadn't realized that, or that they didn't know. But it's true. Making these two things clear suddenly makes everything make a little bit more sense. And the citation is no longer a foreign language. Especially this second point, because as soon as you look at formatting things in terms of making it findable, this nitpicky stuff starts to make sense. So like having all the numbers and the names in the right places actually has a purpose, because you want to find that information. So having the volume and issue number mixed up, or the editor's names where the author's names are supposed to be, actually makes it more difficult to find that information. So that's why that's formatted that way, and it becomes way more clear as to what you're looking for and why it needs to be there. And this kind of explanation works across all of the formatting. So it doesn't really matter if you're doing Chicago or APA or MLA. They all have their own rules, but they're all trying to achieve the same thing. So yes, the formatting is important. Believe me, I know. The formatting is so important. But it becomes much less frustrating when there's an understanding behind it. One thing that I encounter a lot with students is being confused how to cite a chapter in an edited book, because there's these authors and there's these editors, and the editors are on the cover, but the author is underneath the title of the chapter, and it's like, what do I do with all this information? But when you explain to them about making it findable and then giving credit to the right person, it sort of makes sense. Like, oh, right, I would want to use the author's name in the citation, but also include the editor in the bibliographic entry, because I need to give credit to the right person, and then I need to make that information findable. I think that talking to students about citations in a more relaxed way gives them a chance to understand what the citation is supposed to be telling the reader. All of these rules make sense when the fundamentals of citations are made clear. But for some reason, this is not always the place that students get to start from when they learn about citing. They start from a negative place, and in turn have a negative experience with citations when it really doesn't have to be that way. So this sort of brings me to the end of my rant about citations. But thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference.